my impression of what the story that data could tell, especially the story that you can collect from digital systems, was way more significant than what I realized it was once I hit the shop floor. And the data in these systems in Excel captures a tiny portion of what's actually happening. And at best, what this data can do is to help to create these data-informed interactions in the right spot. But ultimately, the kinds of things that we need to do to solve these problems are a lot more sophisticated and have need a lot more context than is available from these other systems. So effectively, like what we're trying to do with technology is to stand our best problem solvers in front of our most important problems, at which point, it transitions from, looking at the data to looking at the problem. And I think that's the key thing to recognize here, that there is the truth is way beyond the kind of things that we can capture in data alone. Sort of, and you mentioned engagement, and I think this is a good transition to the next topic here. As we know, data alone does not drive improvement. Manufacturing today and for the foreseeable future is still fundamentally a people business. Data and insights can drive improvement, but if and only if people take action. So, question for you is, how do you get front lines to buy into your continuous improvement process and systems to actually become sufficiently engaged to want to take action?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, one of the things I view it as is it's less about buy-in for me and more about ownership, right? So from that side, what we looked to do was we wanted to craft a solution with them. And what that meant was getting their voice and giving them a chance to kind of capture the information, but in a way that made sense for them. So, as we'll talk about it later on, but as we built out our downtime trees and our asset hierarchies and things like that, we asked the question of, what do you call this piece of equipment? What do you say when this happens? How does this, what does this mean to you if I say this, that, or the other? And the feedback we started to get was, I don't know what that means. I don't know what EM05 is on this piece of equipment, but I do know this process it does, and that's how I call it. So as we started to build these tags and we started to talk through these ideas, we tried to capture their voice. And that was a general theme that we wanted to carry through this entire initiative was, we're building a continuous improvement culture. We're building a problem-solving mindset, explaining what the 5 whys are and understanding from a lean manufacturing to 8 wastes. And one of the core wastes, I think we've talked about this before, is, the people themselves. We don't ask the people and engage with them. So really it was about reducing waste of our people's talents and skills in conjunction with all the core manufacturing stuff that you just have to do to build a good and well-functioning site.
Yeah, and I think giving them a voice is a key thing here, and that leads well into our next poll, which we'll kick off now, and then so for the next poll, how do you get your front lines to buy into your continuous improvement systems and process? And I think the first thing, gave them a voice to identify problems and share improvement ideas. Second, educate on continuous improvement principles and the value of tracking the data. Third, collaboration during the planning process. And fourth, we don't have buy-in yet, which I think many organizations are in that state where it's a work in progress. And I think everything is a work in progress. But I think this key thing here is to give them a voice here. So we'll let the poll go here, and I'll close this down. And again, we can discuss the results when they pop up here. But one of the things, improving with data is not new. We've been doing this in manufacturing for a long, long time. And even some of the methods that people used decades ago are still being used today, and it's because they work. So the idea of collecting data, working with your teams, creating a whiteboard to capture performance it's a pretty engaging process. And one of the things that that process of using whiteboards in Excel does is it allows for operators to be on the journey the whole time. There's no point at which operators don't understand what's going on. They understand having a whiteboard, having the red marker and having the green marker and using it at this point. And I think what happens often is if you come at this from a tools and technology standpoint, you look at the end result of these initiatives. You see the whiteboard that's configured, and I know that you have a pretty awesome example of a whiteboard, and you think that in order to provide the same value, you simply need to replace this manual system with a digital system. And what that fails to recognize is that there was a process that created engagement, that created engagement that was actually brought people along for the journey. technology, it's easy to just turn on technology with a switch, but us humans don't work that way, and we need to work more slowly. And it's great to see here this, give them a voice, to identify problems, which is kind of the key thing here that we're trying to do. We're trying to elevate the operator in front of the machine, give them that voice to point at that problem, and give them that stick to poke you and the rest of the organization to work on the right stuff. So I'd be interested to sort of hear, for you to dive in deeper to some of those experiences, and specifically around this idea of giving operators a voice and have them truly believe that you're listening.
We can do that. I think actually, if it's okay, we can switch to that whiteboard picture now, because this provides the context for a lot of what we were dealing with there. So what you'll see in front of you is a whiteboard from a line that we were undergoing a PPQ on, and basically what that meant was we were qualifying the line at its final qualification as part of commercial run. So we had an abundance of data on here, and I had one of my employees going out to take some pictures while I was off shift and things like that. And what I noticed on here was a ridiculous amount of detail. And the pictures weren't doing it justice, because at the end of the day, they weren't going anywhere. We had the pictures, but we weren't using them. So I just kind of went out and started talking to the operators and asked the question. I said, does this feel as insane as it looks? I think there's a little bit of an old school mindset. The operators need to feel the pain of something for them to fully understand it. And I've come to realize that with technology becoming what it is, and it's becoming somewhat ubiquitous, that we can trust people to do the right thing if we hire the right people and give them the ownership and the freedom to do so. So when we had that conversation, I asked the question, okay, this looks insane. Does it actually feel as crazy as it looks to me on the outside? And the answer was yes. We don't know why we're doing this. We put all this data on here, we don't do anything with it, and then we do it again the next day. So it becomes kind of this Sisyphus thing where we're pushing this boulder up the hill, and then we wait for it to fall back down and do it again the next day. And they literally had to erase their own work to do this the next day. So all that said, essentially what we went out to do was say, okay, look, let's build out a defined structure. Let's build a proof of concept tool, if you will, in Excel. And we did that. And we built this tool, and we started capturing it in a very structured fashion, using a defined asset hierarchy with set downtime rules and all that kind of stuff. So what we put out there was a tablet that links to an Excel sheet, and then another Excel sheet that aggregates all this data. And then in conjunction with the engineering team, we built a once weekly review of downtime on the operating floor in the room. Took half an hour out of the production day to talk to our team about what they saw, what the data said, and then give them insight into some of the short-term and long-term projects. And one of the things that we found was this soon certain feedback, whether it was positive or negative, started to reinforce behaviors. And I was amazed to see that I was getting calls off shift about the thing, Excel's not working, or, I can't put this in, or how do I make this happen? Which I was more than happy to take, because at the end of the day, it's all about ownership and engagement. And we were seeing it in abundance at that point. So I think one of the things we found with this was, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the next section, but Excel is a high entropy solution, if you will. It naturally wants to decay. And the more people you get in there, the higher that rate of entropy generation becomes. So it just wants to fall apart on a regular basis. What we talked to them about was, okay, now the next step in this is we've taken away the total loss of the historical data. So how can we build this and do something more robust? Enter Raven. So we started showing them Raven on other packaging lines, because this team on this specific line is a different class of operator, different grade of operator. And we showed them the other ones, and they said, wow, this is fantastic. It's so robust and so easy to do. So we're in the process of implementing a line of a Raven on this particular line. And it's going to be a game changer in the sense of the visibility to production, but also the consistent capture of downtime, and doing it in a way that it really feels respectful to the operators. They feel like they're being heard. And they're also going to have immediate access to that data once we go live with that system, which is something I'm incredibly excited about, because they want to engage. And I think that's kind of what this has reinforced for me. And you get that little bit of confirmation bias, so bear with me on it. But we have the ability now for them to use technology in a productive, constructive way. And it's done in a respectful fashion, such that they feel like they're part of the solution, and not feeling like they're going back to that information black hole of just throwing stuff in there and watching it kind of get sucked up and torn apart. So from that perspective, I think if we looked at the ownership and the buy-in, that's been a perfect case study for us in terms of just how well they've latched onto it once they've been given a chance to have that ownership and have that voice in the process that we have. And like you said, Martin, it's not about the tool, it's about the building of the process and the engagement, and then finding the tool that supports that and becomes part of that natural process without having to shoehorn it or wedge it in. And I think that's kind of what we found here.
I think when I look at that whiteboard, I see kind of the care that was put into filling out those numbers and writing in that content, which sort of shows to me kind of like a high level of engagement. And I think you see that level of engagement with whiteboards early on. I think you highlighted that it's kind of there's a place for whiteboards, and same for Excel. There's a place for Excel at the start. And then what happens is that these kinds of systems are not designed to be sustained over time. And what happens, and I'm sure you saw this when you worked in consulting, you have this little burst of innovation, of collaboration, of engagement, and then the honeymoon period wears off. And then what's holding it together is a whiteboard or Excel, and then it just fizzles. And then this is the test for whiteboards, is to run your finger down and see if the ink comes off. And then what you often see, these dusty whiteboards where basically stuff wasn't updated. So I think the key thing is to sort of not discount the value of the kind of interactions and engagement that got to this point. And now there's a way to get to this point with technology, but the kind of a collaborative experience to establish trust is so key. And we don't want to remove that from the equation, because it's important. And if you go from Excel and whiteboards to a technology solution, we need to remember that people need to still be brought along for that journey, and we still need to have that co-creation phase here.